Hello everyone and welcome to the Filmcast, the official podcast of slashfilm.com. My name is David Chen and with me are
Devindra Hardwar
and Adam Quigley.
Joining us later on is going to be Anthony Hoff from the tech website venturebeat.com. But before we get to any of that, we should just let you know if you're just tuning in to the Filmcast for the first time, we broadcast live on Sunday nights usually at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Pacific at slashfilm.com/live. We begin by discussing what we've been watching, move on into a dissection of the week's film news, and then conclude with one in-depth review. This week we'll be reviewing the new David Fincher film, The Social Network. If you'd like to email us, let us know what you think of the show. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com or call and leave a voicemail at 781-583-1993. So let's get right into the show, guys. This week, I had the chance to check out Louis C.K.'s new concert film, Hilarious, which actually debuted at Sundance this year. I think one of the first times, if not the first time, that a concert film / stand-up comedy film was at Sundance. So that was a lot of fun, being one of the first people to watch that and being in a huge audience that responded well to that. This is on Epix HD. They had this thing where you could enter like a code to get like a week of service of Epix HD, and I could watch Hilarious for free. Let me ask you, Adam, did you saw this movie. Did you enjoy Hilarious by Louis C.K.?
Well, it's by Louis C.K., so the answer, of course, is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a chance also this week to finish off the last two episodes of his FX series, which I think is really quite brilliant. And it's really like, it's 13 episodes, and it's really like 13 short films almost, and shot really well with like in high def. It looks gorgeous with this really like shallow depth of field that he uses, and yeah, I thought I can't wait to buy the Blu-ray of this thing when it comes out. Hopefully there will be one. But getting back to Louis C.K.'s Hilarious, I think what I like about his comedy is how he kind of skewers the myth of like the modern American family. You know, like he kind of takes the idea of like being happily married and having 2.5 kids and whatever, and just completely rips it to shreds by talking about the daily horrible realities of raising a kid and being married and being divorced and trying to live your life and get laid and do the things that a normal 40-year-old guy will try to do, and how like he fails horribly at all of those things.
I don't think that's necessarily like a new thing, but it's really the way he does it. Like it's how open and honest he is about how he feels,
right?
Which is very rare.
Yeah, because there are certain things, there's certain places that people won't go. Certain places people won't go in terms of their humor. Usually, people's kids, like they don't talk about their kids to the extent that Louis C.K. talks about his kids, and I feel like I'm not a father yet, that I know of, and he makes fatherhood at the same time like sound really rewarding, but also extremely terrifying. And
yes, he points out things that probably wouldn't have occurred to you.
Exactly,
and makes you want to reevaluate that decision.
Exactly. So I think it's definitely worth watching. It feels like his comedy is very much of our time, though. That's one thing I want to point out. Is like, it feels like very relevant to today's generation, and so I wonder about its longevity is one thing I'm curious about. But if you want to have an amazing time on watching a stand-up comedy show, then I think Louis C.K.'s Hilarious is actually probably one of my favorite movies of the year. I don't know if it'll make it up into my top 10, but I definitely enjoyed it a great deal, and a lot more than I enjoyed a lot of the other films we've watched this year. So yeah, it's something I'd strongly recommend, and I assume you would as well, Adam?
Yes, and he also has a stand-up, I can't remember what it's actually called, but just check Netflix Watch instantly. He has another one that's freely available to check out as well, and it's also great. I have all of his stand-up, actually. I bought the DVDs. It's there's one called Shameless and one called Chewed Up, and they're really great. And I think it's Chewed Up. That's the one I think I saw on Netflix.
I return to them, over and over again, because I feel like he speaks to certain eternal truths that I enjoy. He also like challenges the audience in terms of like the humor. Like he also like, in addition to just talking about family and the modern American man, he also goes into places where people usually try not to tread. Like he uses really offensive language, and I think it's his way of trying to explore the way that people use these words, especially like racial slurs, for example. And I don't think he always pulls it off. But it's interesting to see him like experiment with what is acceptable and what is the boundary between what makes people laugh and what's just blatantly offensive. So
right, actually, I think I could mention just one piece for an example. Like when he's bringing up the fact, and it's almost not even like a joke. It's just him bringing up something that he found interesting, which is that like if people tolerated pedophiles more, less kids would die.
Yes. That
and it's a very like you could hear the audience like they don't know if they're supposed to laugh at that or not, and it just kind of suddenly goes quiet. And every now and then he'll just like bring up something like that just to sort of test the water.
Yeah, just to test.
I don't know what to do with that information, but I thought I would share it with you.
Just to test the limits of like what's acceptable. And again, I don't always think he pulls it off. I think sometimes he is genuinely offensive. But it is interesting to see a comedian try to see what is offensive. To see what the boundaries are. Because really, like, there's like humor in comedy, a lot of people say there shouldn't be any boundaries. We should be able to take anything and reinterpret it in a way that makes us laugh about it. And so it's just great to see someone of that skill try to do that. So Louis C.K.'s hilarious. It's available on Epix HD. I assume at some point it'll be on Netflix Watch Instantly. I assume at some point it'll be on DVD. One last thing I want to say about the movie. It also is probably the best looking concert film I've ever seen in terms of stand-up comedy. Like, I don't know, the camera he used, the way he shot it, he consciously tried to make it so that you felt like you were there in the audience. And it definitely looks a lot better than his other concert films, in my opinion. I don't know if you got that feeling, Adam. Did you?
Watching it online, it kind of, I don't know, diminishes the quality a little bit.
Right.
So maybe if... I
think if you compare it like side by side, you would see the difference. But I thought it looked...
Is it still available for free on that site?
I don't. My subscription ran out. Like my trial ran out, so I can't check it out anymore. But yeah, let us know what you think of it at /filmcast@gmail.com. But check out Louis C.K.'s Hilarious. I think it's well worth a watch. If you can't watch it on Epix HD, then wait until later in the year, and you'll be able to rent it on DVD or on Netflix. So, Devindra Hardor, what have you been watching this week?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about The Death of Lone Star, which I think is pretty much the best, at least network show to premiere this fall.
Now, why don't you tell us what it's about?
The first episode, what was that, Dave?
I said, why don't you tell us what the show's about?
Yeah, this is Fox's new con man show. So this is about a guy who, he and his father have made a living of playing cons on people. But in the pilot, this isn't a huge spoiler because this is the entire premise of the show.
Right.
But in the pilot, he decides to settle down and try and live a double life without conning people. But he's now involved with two women, and he's trying to lead two separate lives. I thought it was a really interesting premise. A lot of critics fell head over heels for the show. I think just because in terms of network shows, there just weren't that too many great things this season. But the pilot was very strong. I thought the second episode was very good as well, and it was definitely building up to be very interesting. Definitely an interesting series for Fox, but the pilot premiered to really bad ratings, and I think the second episode was half that. So it was just abysmal. It was canceled after the second episode. And I think they have a couple more episodes filmed, but they're not going to air on TV. So it's just a shame that one of the better shows to come out this year just kind of didn't find any footing. And I think there are multiple reasons for that. There are some great TV critics who've written about The Death of Lone Star. So just go check that out. But it's a shame.
I think there's some interesting points here. Our colleague Miles McNutt brought up this piece by The Masked Scheduler. For those who don't know, The Masked Scheduler, I believe he's an anonymous TV blogger, and the subtitle of the blog is Musings Mostly on the TV Industry and the Goofballs Who Work in It from a Veteran with the Battle Scars to prove he's learned a thing or two about this.
It also seems like he's somebody who's still in the business.
Right, yeah, he's actively making decisions. Yeah, so this guy, maskedscheduler.blogspot.com, who gives an inside look at some of these shows and what happened to them. And it's interesting to hear his analysis of what happened to Lone Star. Let's see here. So he makes 2 points that I think are interesting. Number one, let's see. He says here about putting quotes. Like when I saw the commercial for Lone Star, there's tons of quotes from TV critics. And network executives actually start to believe the critic quotes and even love to put them in promos for the show. Here's the problem. and he was talking about a football game earlier in the post. He says those Chiefs fans who were out of their minds in ecstasy on Sunday could give a flying fuck, and it appears that most of America was of the same mindset. We have evidence and data up the wazoo that critics' quotes don't matter, and in fact are a turnoff to the audience, and yet we do them more for ourselves than for any increase in viewer interest. So that was an interesting point.
Yeah.
And it was also an interesting point he made about here why he thought the show might have failed. He said, I don't read all the analysis of why the show didn't work, but here was my fear from the beginning. We have just suffered through a horrific economic crisis brought on by excess and illusions. We saw the devastating environmental impact of an oil spill and the resulting lack of response and indifference on the part of large corporations as well as the government. The last thing that everyday Americans want to see right now is a good-looking con man who is fucking over two innocent young women who have done nothing wrong other than to love him. And I thought that seemed like an incisive point. What do you make of that, Devindra?
It's definitely a good point, but I think the series was a very interesting look at like our current economic climate and things that led to it. I think it was making some interesting points, but that's something that's very hard to sell to general audiences in TV promos and whatnot. I was on a flight to San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and they were offering up the pilot as a free thing to watch during the flight, and this was like weeks before the pilot aired. So they pushed really hard to promote this series, but for whatever reason, it just it didn't click, and it's a shame. It has a strong cast. I think the lead guy, James Woke, has a good amount of on-screen charisma, and it has Adrienne Palicki from Friday Night Lights, who I know many people don't like, but I thought she did some excellent work there, and John Voight and David Keith were in it too. It's just a shame we're never going to see the story end, and I guess it's just one of those things where Fox, it just couldn't. A good show couldn't survive on Fox, although I'm not sure if it would have survived anywhere, really.
Yeah. What else have you been watching, Devindra?
I also have been going through the Daria DVD set, and this is the TV series, the animated series from the 90s, created by Glenn Eichler, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. And, Daria is a spin-off character from Beavis and Butthead. So this was the show I watched during my teenage years, and going back to it now, it's surprising to me how well it holds up. All these, all the episodes, I think, are still hilarious. The writing is great. The voice acting is great. And the show really comes across as something that's special for its subtle humor. And I'm not sure if many people remember this series. So if you watched it when you were growing up, or if you just remember it, check out the DVD set, because it has everything. It has all 5 seasons. I think it has, I think there were 2 movies made. It has all those 2, and you get it all for like under $30. It's a phenomenal deal. It's a ton of TV, and some of the best TV, animated comedy writing you'll ever see. It's a damn shame, we're not seeing more stuff like this on TV right now.
All right, I will check it out. I remember watching a few episodes and really enjoying it. It was like really like super deadpan humor type of deal, right?
Well,
right.
Daria herself is, but the other characters are, they're varied. You have it's basically all high school stereotypes. So it fits right in with other shows like Freaks and Geeks and, other things that we've been watching, and Glee to an extent too. But I think it does it in a way that was really fresh and original for the time. The only problem with the DVD set is that none of the original music is included, because getting the music rights for that would have been just insane. So we lose that, but the show itself is still amazing. So check it out. Very
cool. I think you have just convinced me. I will try to go buy the DVD.
It's really good. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our What We've Been Watching segment tonight. Not that much we've been watching this week, because I think we've been seeing The Social Network too many times. But let's move on into film news. This week we actually received word of several deaths of some iconic film figures. And one of them is Sally Menke. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce her last name.
I think so.
Sally Menke, I think. And this is the Oscar-nominated editor of Quentin Tarantino's films. Devindra,
from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning, ever since his first film. So, Devindra, I know this loss hit you quite hard, yes?
Yeah, I mean, she was 40-something. She was very, very young. And the entire, the circumstances surrounding her death just are completely insane and kind of infuriating. She was a victim of the LA heat wave last week.
Right.
So she was hiking, and it sounds like she fell victim to dehydration and kind of just collapsed. So it's a damn shame, because she is so young and she has done so much great work, and she's been instrumental to Quentin Tarantino's career. Like, without her, sort of I don't know, shielding his insanity. I don't know if Quentin Tarantino's movies would have had as much effect. Like, you need a really good editor to chop down somebody with all the manic ideas that Quentin Tarantino has. And, she also edited the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I loved that movie growing up, although I know it's not that great. So it's just a shame, mainly because she was so young and she had a rich career ahead of her.
John Lopez from Vanity Fair and the Little Gold Men blog actually wrote a really lovely in memoriam piece, and I'd like to read part of it, if I may. Tarantino has freely admitted that editing with Menke was like working with a writing partner, and no doubt the director's trademark ability to hold and savor the tension of a beat well past the point when other directors would have moved on, flowed from Menke's artful cutting. How else could he have gotten away with an opening scene in Inglourious Bastards that occupies practically a whole film reel, or danced delightfully around the meandering diner conversation that sets up Reservoir Dogs, or found such depth of feeling in Robert Forster's stoic, steady smile in Jackie Brown? Arguably, Samuel L. Jackson owes much of his reputation and his career to Menke's judicious close-up choices in Pulp Fiction. I'm going to skip ahead here. It's easy to forget an editor when we wax rhapsodic about a director's framing, a cinematographer's lighting, or an actor's performance. However, every casual student of the medium knows you could make no bigger mistake. In a great editor's hands, all these elements are merely the marble from which a masterpiece must be uncovered. The true alchemy of film, the dreamlike nature that helps us sit still for 100 minutes or more, seems to flow like magic from the space between a cut. Although they work in solitude in a dark room far away from the convivial atmosphere of the movie set, editors are often the true maestros, leading audiences through at just the right pace, finding small emotions on actors' faces and building dramatic meaning where there is none before. I'll skip to the end here. It seems impossible to overstate Menke's loss for any fan of Tarantino's work. To crib from his famous invocation of Ezekiel 25:17, she was the good shepherd leading us through the valley of film. In her white-gloved hands, we moviegoers feared no evil. So I thought that was really lovely, and kind of it's so hard to articulate how important an editor is, and I thought that did a really good job of it. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Quentin Tarantino's career sort of unfolds now.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see like what his next film is like, and if the difference, if we notice a difference in how it's edited and cut, because it is kind of like they were in this partnership, and now it's not a partnership anymore. So
I think the real key is that hopefully he finds somebody else who's sort of a great editor on the same level. Some people in the chat room are saying, he may start editing himself. Everything I've heard and read about their work collaboration, their partnership, that would be a terrible idea. So, Quentin Tarantino, he's the idea man. He writes the stuff, he gets the footage down, but I don't know if he has the real, the focus and commitment to really do the editing job entirely on his own.
We also heard a word of the death of actor Tony Curtis, who was a very famous actor, especially in the 50s. He was in films such as Sweet Smell of Success, The Defiant Ones, and Some Like It Hot. He was also in, I believe, Spartacus, and a few other films around that time period that were including, The Vikings, Operation Petticoat, Kings Go Forth. Just a really talented actor who was a heartthrob back in the day, and unfortunately he is also gone. And another death, Devindra, Arthur Penn, yes? Who also passed away this week. And this is one of the iconic directors. He directed films like Bonnie and Clyde and The Miracle Worker. Talk about your relationship to his films, Devindra.
Well, I think Arthur Penn is interesting, specifically for Bonnie and Clyde, because I don't know if any project of his has really encapsulated his sort of ideals. He was big on people fighting against authority. He was big on outcasts. And that movie was exactly what U.S. cinema needed at the time. He brought over all these European sort of ideas about how you create a cinema and overt sexuality on film and violence on film. Like the last, one of the last scenes in this film is a very, very violent shootout. And if you haven't seen this film yet, definitely go out and do it, because it's phenomenal, and it led up to everything that happened in the 70s with the new Hollywood people coming in like Scorsese and Coppola and everybody. So he was just incredibly influential. I mean, he hasn't made anything as great as Bonnie and Clyde later on in his career, but he's still important.
Yeah. So certainly, it's been kind of a rough week in terms of losing really valuable people for cinema. Sally Menke, Tony Curtis, and Arthur Penn, rest in peace. You will be missed. Let's move on in terms of film news and what we're going to discuss this week. This week, friend of the show, Armand White, who is a film critic for New York Press, and who appeared on the show a few weeks ago, released an article entitled Discourteous Discourse at nypress.com. You can read it. And the subtitle is The Social Networking Approach to Film Criticism is Not About Democracy. And I think this article is really interesting because it kind of codifies, in some ways, the arguments that Armand was making during the After Dark episode when he was on here to review Inception with us. And there are a few points here that I thought would be worth bringing up, sort of reading from the article and kind of responding to, because I think it's worth responding to some of these points that have been made not only by Armand but by other people in the film criticism establishment as well. So one of the points he makes here is about the sort of new, quote unquote, new way that film journalism works. And he writes here, consider how film criticism now works. Publicists select favorable media outlets to create advanced buzz, embargoing others, and then, with frat boy mentality in effect, no one else in cyberspace dares dissent from the hype. Ironically, the social network locates the origin for this unprincipled practice in Zuckerberg's misconduct. To praise this movie is to praise the whole rotten system. As chairman of the New York Film Critics Circle, I proudly pledge to defend the dignity of criticism as specified in the organization's original charter, but it couldn't have happened at a more difficult time. This summer's most alarming movie event was watching the critical profession get drowned out by trendy aggregate websites. So let's parse this out a little bit and talk about this. And because what he's referring to, this actually happened to The Social Network, the movie that we're going to review today. And arguably, I was a part of it. And let me talk about what I mean by that. The way that they marketed this movie, and there's actually the Sony and Columbia Pictures sort of released and marketed this movie. It's actually kind of interesting, and I want to say kind of brilliant, because I mean, the movie opened at number 1 this week and made, I think, $23 million, fulfilling completely Adam's prediction of exactly how well it would do. Adam, are you happy? And
vaguely,
and obviously proving my prediction incorrect that I made a few weeks ago. But what Sony did was they allowed 2 people to review the movie, specifically Scott Foundas from Film Comment and Peter Travers from Rolling Stone. And these 2 reviewers gave this movie like glowing reviews. They're like, this is a brilliant movie. It brilliantly defines this generation. Peter Travers says, because he knows a lot about our generation, and and it was then later on, like a couple weeks after that, the movie was screened for, I would say, half a dozen to a dozen or so bloggers, right? Including Peter Serretta, the editor-in-chief of SlashFilm.com. The vast majority of those people love the movie. So now you have this kind of thing where, like, okay, a few people have seen literally a few people have seen the movie and are authorized to write about it, just like a handful of people. And everyone else is, quote-unquote, frothing at the mouth, as one industry executive described it, to see this movie. And everyone's deathly afraid of not, quote-unquote, getting it. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you give a negative review, everyone's going to say you don't get it or something like that. And that's kind of what Armand White is railing against, I think. And I think there is a certain degree to which he's right. He's right in the sense that a lot of film criticism, quote unquote, a lot of film reviewing, a lot of the film journalism industry, it's really this fine line between, movie publicity and movie criticism or movie analysis or whatever, what have you call it, right? Because I'll give you a story about this, okay? I mean, people have listened to interviews that I've done on the Filmcast, and you guys know what type of interviews I try to do. My inspirations are people like Terry Gross or Tom Ashbrook on NPR, and even though I may never achieve what they are able to do, like that's what I try to dive in depth into the process and whatever. That's kind of what I go for. I may not succeed, but that's what I go for. That's my goal. I tried really hard to get one-on-one interviews with Aaron Sorkin and other people from The Social Network. And I remember sitting at the Social Network press junket, and I struck up a conversation with the person next to me because I'm a very gregarious person, and the woman there was from a site called teen.com, and she had received one-on-ones with pretty much every single person in the cast. Or at least, when I asked her, she said, I'm talking with all of them. So I don't know if she was one-on-ones with every single person or if she's talking with all of them in a group. Whatever the situation is, I struggled to get one-on-one, right? Like, I had to, like, ask and, especially to get one-on-one. I really wanted to interview Aaron Sorkin. I think a lot of you people listening would have enjoyed that. And I couldn't because... Sony is they want to use this press time as best as they can. So they're going to give all the one-on-ones or all the interview access to the Team.com person, because if you read Team.com or if you read /film.com, like which audience is more likely to go see the Social Network? It's going to be probably the person from /film.com. So it's not a good allocation of resources to give me time to do the one-on-ones or whatever if the person at Team.com people on that site might have never heard of the movie, So there's this kind of whole thing with, it's really kind of a fine line between what is publicity and what is sort of film journalism these days. And I think it's good for people to be conscious of that. I mean, let me ask you guys, Devindra and Adam, have you guys, encountered this? Have you ever felt like, you were under pressure to do a certain thing or say a certain thing, or that you felt like that the publicity arm of the movie studio controlled to some degree how you were saying things?
I'm not sure about specifically, but you know what, with all the Scott Pilgrim stuff during Comic-Con, it was hard not to love the film at that point and hard not to get the sense that you should love the film.
Right.
I honestly did love it, but you could tell that you were part of a huge, huge marketing machine. Like when you saw, thousands of people walking down, San Diego streets to go see this movie for free, that's sort of an indelible image to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes an impression, mm-hmm. and it does have some effect on us, no matter how unquantifiable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's this argument's kind of built on a flawed premise, though, that it's like people are buying into the publicity and the marketing rather than what's being shown of the movie itself. Like, people aren't excited about the trailer, they're excited about what the trailer promises, which is the movie. And then when you start having buzz building up for a film, it's because of the actual movie. It's because of the critics that actually saw the movie. It's not about the marketing anymore.
Well,
so, really what people are responding to, or this whole issue should be surrounding, is this sort of shutting down of opinions once people collectively decide on how good or bad a film is.
No. But Adam, I think there's I think what Armand White is pointing out here is that there is some kind of conflict of interest that happens when a movie studio chooses 12 people, us included, to go see the movie in advance, and we're allowed to write reviews, and no one else is allowed to write reviews, right? That means we get a ton of page views from that. We get a lot of publicity from that. We get it's basically it makes an uncomfortable situation if we don't like the movie. Fortunately, we love the Social Network, independently of whatever access we got to it, but it does, if it's a movie that kind of sucks, then that's an awkward situation, because you're given a sort of privilege, I want to say, opportunity, whatever, to review it early, and that review gives you and your publication benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I understand all of that. I think that people sort of oversell how much effect it actually has in the end. Once you get past that, obviously the first few weeks, suddenly you have the buzz building, but if the movie itself doesn't actually live up to that, for each individual person that is going to end up reviewing the film, that will be reflected in the overall, the film aggregate.
Yeah. So what you're saying is in the end it'll all even out. If the movie sucks, no amount of publicity is going to be able to do unless
exactly,
unless they're literally paying people off and people are lying about whether they like the movie, then it's not going to make
right. The only impact it really has is on the first week of the film's release.
But incidentally, that is, arguably the most important week.
From a box office standpoint.
Right,
but if you're, I feel like we should disassociate ourselves from how successful a film was at the box office from whatever sort of discussion we have about the movie on a qualitative standpoint.
Yeah. I think our commitment is just that we always try to be impartial about a movie, and but it would be irresponsible or I guess misleading if people didn't know that all this stuff is going on. Like, even though we love the movie The Social Network and we talk about it and we have lives, okay? Like, I have like a life outside of what I do at slashfilm.com. This is not my full-time job. And if I didn't love this movie, I wouldn't spend so much time trying to get people to see it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I have other things
honestly,
to do.
For all this publicity that's been, I have no idea what the actual number is for like how much they spent on the movie.
Right.
But I would not be surprised if they spent as much on marketing as they did
I completely agree.
itself.
Yeah, they very well might have spent as much on the movie publicity and marketing as they did on the actual movie.
And if that's the case, the film's actually a failure.
Well,
at the box office because it didn't perform that incredibly well. Like, it made about as much as The Town did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens in terms of how well it performs. But I mean, the point being, yeah, like we wouldn't devote this much time to it, covering it at slashfilm.com if we didn't truly love it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think.
Okay, sorry. Continue.
No, you go ahead, Adam. What are you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, the irony of Armin White's article is that, like, he clearly didn't get the movie.
The Social Network you're referring to, yeah, because
yes.
he wrote a very scathingly negative review about it.
But like the problem isn't with the fact that he didn't like the movie; it's that like he just completely misinterpreted the point of the movie.
Right. Well,
it's also that everyone else is wrong. So
right.
Well, what do you mean by that, Devindra?
Well, I mean that's the whole reason he wrote this article too. Like, this separate post outside of the review, I felt it was definitely brought about because of that. And it's like, oh my god, everyone's fawning over this movie.
Yeah.
And me being the lone visionary, it's like...
Yeah, I mean, I can see...
You could, like, sum up why he's wrong just by, like, one sentence.
If you can... I mean, if he really believes what he's saying, and I have reason to believe that that's the case, I can see why he'd be pissed. Imagine, like, you consider yourself, like, fairly skilled at being a film critic, and all these other people like slashfilm.com and other sites are getting to see the movie before you, and they are getting to, for a few weeks, they get to dictate the discourse on this movie, and I can see why that'd be frustrating. And I don't say that patronizingly. I
want to read like a section from this. Actually, you might have read this. I'm not positive, but he says, as uncredentialed experts, that's us by the way, multiply and flounder, we're all victimized by hype. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. Nothing proves that better than all the hype for The Social Network, which enshrines Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg's antisocial behavior without understanding how his neuroses set the agenda for internet bullying and film culture chaos. It's like, wow, way to just completely misread what the movie's about.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about more of what our interpretation of what the movie enshrines when we get to our review. But
yeah, I'll say this right now: it does not enshrine Mark Zuckerberg in any way.
It's also funny that he didn't really take too much issue with Scott Foundis's review, which I think is far more troubling.
I agree. Than anything that we have done, or any the one that we know has done. I mean, Scott Foundis, extraordinarily talented film critic, who saw the movie presumably as a curator for the New York Film Festival, or as a festival organizer for the New York Film Festival, and got to review it early. And as we discussed earlier on this podcast, Devindra, like that's kind of a huge conflict of interest, that if you leave a positive review, it might motivate people to go see this movie at your festival. Mm-hmm. And that disclosure was nowhere in his review, Yeah. That's a huge conflict of interest, and it's like seemingly like, I don't know. That's a problem.
I don't see how in any conceivable way, if he had a negative review, that he would have printed it.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't work. It would. I don't know.
And we're not saying like, oh yeah, therefore we're better than him. But I'm saying, let's open up the dialogue and make sure everyone knows what's going on here. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next point here. And this is, again, it's another interesting point that we've discussed in the podcast. Reviews of blockbuster films, Toy Story 3 and Inception, by professional established film critics, myself particularly, received a record number of largely intemperate posts on the Rotten Tomatoes site, which then expanded into wholesale internet attacks by agitated fanboys and upstart blogs. A new model of cultural response is taking over. Criticism of criticism, and critics as a pointless, snaky substitute for examining films themselves. Attacks from bloggers, crude interlopers of a once august profession, are not about diversity of opinion. What's at root is an undisguised rivalry. Every moviegoer with a laptop. I just said every moviegoer with a podcast, but it's actually every moviegoer with a laptop claims equal vengeful standing with so-called professionals. This anti-intellectual backlash defies the purpose of the Film Critic Circle's founding in 1935, professional dignity is the last thing interneters respect. Their loudmouth enmity and lack of knowledge are so overwhelming that it is imperative to put this crisis in perspective. These new social networks overturn the informed judgments and occupational decorum of journalist critics, substituting the glib enthusiasms and non-discriminating devotion of apparently juvenile cliques. Worse yet, this schoolyard style of pure group fanaticism has devolved into all-out, ugly intimidation, internet bullying. It has begun to sway the professional ranks already frightened by media transitions that have cost many of my colleagues their jobs. Okay, so I agree with, I'd say half of what he's saying here, right? In terms of, I am not a fan anymore. Maybe back in a younger day when I was more foolish and less wise, I would be part of that internet flash mob that would go and try to pillory someone who disagreed with someone, with that gave a negative review to like Halo 3 or something like that. Like I might have been part of that crowd. But after doing this for the Slash Filmcast for a few years, it's kind of like you realize how silly that is and how much more valuable it is to have different people's opinions to kind of challenge your own and to see what makes your opinion worth keeping or to introduce new ideas into your line of thinking, So I am also really disheartened by, the internet mob that tries to completely, destroy anyone that has any diversity of opinion on these fanboy properties. So that part I agree with. The part I disagree with here is about how, to some extent, yeah, it is disheartening to see film criticism as a paid and respectable profession go down the tubes due to the internet age. But I think we talked about this during the show when he was on, was about how was about how it's not a zero-sum game. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the existence of internet, film journalist sites precludes the existence of high-quality film criticism, right? It's just that there are more options, and people tend to gravitate towards those things that they relate with. And maybe we on the Slash Filmcast speak to a different life experience than Armand White speaks to. And maybe there's some value in that. Maybe that there's something people find about our show that they can relate to, that they get some kind of enlightenment out of, they get some kind of amusement out of. Does that mean that just because we don't have the training of an Armand White that we should not be allowed to exist? It seems as though that might be what he's arguing for, and I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, what do you think, Devindra?
Yeah. We've already had this discussion pretty much, so I don't want to retread this.
I mean, but what about the first part about online bullies? I mean, what do you guys? What do you guys think?
His point is like disconnected actually from like what he's writing about, because like he makes it sound like it applies strictly to him or professional critics like him. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm subjected to the exact same thing.
It's the internet.
Yeah, it's the internet.
Kind of just noticed this. So.
Yes, yeah. And there's one last thing he writes here about spoilers. Consider the illiterate belief in spoilers that now restricts critical discussion. Fear of quote-unquote spoilers nullifies any attempt at detailed interpretation or explanation of a film. It forestalls the tendency to analyze meaning and content that used to be a tenet of liberal arts education. Somehow the critical practice of analysis, reflection, and comparison has not dawned on today's consumers or taught them the merits of a reasoned response. In the blockbuster era, criticism has wound up in a disrespected place where it no longer addresses audiences' needs for enlightenment and excellence. Criticism has lost its educative function, and the culture loses its moral foundation.
Moral foundation.
Yeah. That's so. First of all, I want to say, regardless of what you think about the viewpoints expressed in this article, I do kind of love the way his words work in this article. Like there's kind of this rhythm to them, this kind of eloquence that I really enjoy.
He's very good at that.
Yeah, even as half the time I'm like, I completely don't agree with anything you're saying here.
Yeah.
And I do like this point that he's making about how lack of spoilers precludes critical discussion. I mean, obviously we are really heavy on the spoiler warnings, but that's the point. We are heavy on the spoiler warnings in the sense that we believe that you should be able to talk about the endings of films. Obviously not in the way that Armand White might like, and we might not talk about them in the way that Armand White might like, but part of the motivation for starting this podcast was that people don't talk enough about the endings of movies, and that we want to do that. So So this is something that I kind of agree with him on. Again, for every point that I agree with Armand White on in this article, there's a point that I'm just like, wow, I really don't agree with that.
Let's move on, Dave.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay. All right. So again, the article is called Discourteous Discourse. Check it out and let us know what you think at /filmcast@gmail.com. So that's going to bring us to the end of our film news segment. And before we get to reviews, we want to thank our donors this week. A big thanks to Kevin W. for his generous donation, and also to Mike Chapman for becoming a recurring donor at the rate of $2 a month. Again, guys, all the money goes to helping us survive in this recession economy, and we really appreciate you guys helping to pitch in money for what you think is a worthwhile show. You can go to /filmcast.com and use the links on the left-hand side of the page to donate to our show or become a monthly subscriber. We really appreciate any money that you can pitch in, so thanks so much. So with all that being said, let's get to our review of The Social Network.
I need to do something substantial in order to get the attention of the clubs.
Why?
Because they're exclusive and fun, and they lead to a better life.
People want to go on the internet and check out their friends, so why not build a website that offers that friends, pictures, profiles?
I'm talking about taking the entire social experience of college and putting it online.
The site got 2,200 hits within 2 hours.
22,000.
This idea is potentially worth millions of dollars.
Millions?
He stole our website.
They're saying we stole the Facebook.
I know what it says.
So did we?
$1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? $1 billion.
You're going to get left behind. It's moving faster than any of us ever imagined it would.
Let's sue him in federal court.
I can't wait to stand over your shoulder and watch you write as a check.
If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you'd invented Facebook.
Is there anything that you need to tell me?
Your actions could have permanently destroyed everything I've been working on.
We have been working on.
Did you like being a joke? Do you want to go back to that? Mark!
This is our time.
You're being accused of intentionally breaching security, violating copyrights, violating individual privacy.
Your best friend is suing you for $600 million.
That was from the trailer of David Fincher's The Social Network. Love that trailer. This is the /Filmcast, the official podcast of /film.com. Joining us today is a very special guest. He is the assistant editor at venturebeat.com. Anthony Ha, thanks for joining us today on the /Filmcast.
Great, thanks for having me.
Anthony, we invited you on because you have some knowledge of what's going on in the tech world, and you have some knowledge of what's going on with Facebook. So why don't you tell us briefly what you thought of this film?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess first I should probably preface this by saying that, I mean, definitely I talk about startups, talk to Facebook all the time, but, most of the things that happen in the film predate my tech reporting days by several years.
Well, then it's completely worthless. No, I'm just...
Yeah, basically, I'm going to hang up now.
Okay. He was in college with the rest of us.
See you later.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, certainly, just starting from my perspective as a moviegoer, I thought it was an amazing movie. Either the best film I saw this year, or certainly in the top. And I mean, there's so many different things I could talk about. I guess to me, one of the most impressive things, given how much talk there was before about how little, basically they had no access to Mark Zuckerberg, no access to anyone at Facebook. It was that what a compelling character he still is in the film, in a way that I think a lot of people sort of described him as it's really important to talk about him. The social networks, Mark Zuckerberg is Mark Zuckerberg in quotes, Mark Zuckerberg, the character, not the person.
Right.
But, as a film character, I feel like he's just incredibly compelling and, just really amazing, both as written and then as performed as well.
Yeah. He's totally an Aaron Sorkin version of Mark Zuckerberg, but like in the best way.
I think he's one of the most compelling, interesting characters in any film this year. And I think the big reason for, one of the evidence of that is that, I've talked to a bunch of people about this movie, and every single person has had kind of like a different opinion, or there have been very divergent opinions on what to think of him. Some people are like, oh yeah, like the movie makes him out to be, I feel so bad for him, I feel so sad for him, I feel so much sympathy for him, and others are like, he's a complete douchebag, And I think that Sorkin has created this character that you can read into him a variety of things, and I think the way he does that is a testament to Sorkin's skill and to David Fincher's skill. Let me ask you, Devindra, your thoughts on The Social Network.
I'm a big tech fan too, and I also write for VentureBeat where Anthony works. But Anthony has been doing it much longer than me, so I've been coming at it from more the film angle. This is a technically impressive film, just pretty much on every single level. So I'm not at all surprised why the film people, critics in general, and audiences who know about movies have fallen head over heels for this film. It is interesting though to see like the more of the tech reporters coming at it because of its inaccuracies and just calling the movie out because of that. I think it stands very well as a film and definitely one of the best films of this year. In terms of its accuracy, I guess some of that is still up in question. The Mark Zuckerberg in this film is not the same guy as he is in real life. In real life, I've heard him described more as quiet and kind of reserved, whereas here he's a mile-a-minute talker, like every single Aaron Sorkin character. So that's
he's still pretty reserved though. Like they take elements of, I think. Yeah. Sorkin probably looked at the real Mark Zuckerberg and they're like, how can I transform what I see here into a fascinating character cinematically?
Well, I mean, if you look at the opening scene, okay, so I saw the opening scene, or I've seen the movie 3 times, and let's put it this way. For the third time that I saw it, and I told my publicist that this was my third time seeing it, and the movie began, and there's kind of a little bit of flutter in the movie beginning, like there was a little bit of problem with the projection, and the publicist leans in to me and she whispers, "Are they supposed to be talking this fast?" I was like, "Is everything?" She's like, "Oh, is everything okay with the print?" And I was like, "Yes, this is correct." because
your publicist had to tell you that?
No. I had to tell her that.
I know, but your publicist had to ask.
Well, because it was like ambiguous if there was something wrong with print, and that's how fast they speak in the opening scene. And apparently, the real Mark Zuckerberg doesn't talk that fast. He's not like that at all. So, Aaron Sorkin's never met Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't, he tried to, but he was glad when they failed to get Mark Zuckerberg to work because he wanted this to be his own creation.
Yeah. I think on that level, he's definitely succeeded. And the talent involved in this film, too. I think I've loved Andrew Garfield in many of his recent films, like the Red Riding Hood, the first film. But here,
Red Riding, not
Red Riding. Yeah. But here, he's playing Eduardo Severin as a very, just a very emotionally connected character to Mark Zuckerberg. Their relationship, I think, is really well defined. And I'm not sure if it exactly occurred this way in real life. I did read The Accidental Billionaires, the book this movie is based off of, and that one also had a lot of information given by Severin. So that's how that book was written, really. Yeah. So he came off as really sympathetic there too. It's not a huge surprise that he's here, but I think Garfield does some amazing work. Just describing this character as somebody who's sort of been betrayed by one of his best friends. And Justin Timberlake, I think, continues to be doing a very amazing transition to being an actor.
Yeah. Adam Quigley, your thoughts on The Social Network?
Well, if anyone read my review, they know that I thought it was phenomenal. I think it's by far the best movie of the year, and actually, even beating out Scott Pilgrim. And now that I've seen it 3 times, I think I can comfortably say that, which I never thought would be possible, considering how much I love Scott Pilgrim.
That is I am shocked. I am surprised. So yes,
it's that good, and it's kind of interesting because we had this conversation before about biopics and why I generally don't like them, and I don't like movies that try to just recreate the facts of what happened in real life on the screen. And I feel like The Social Network sort of embodies why I don't like that by essentially not doing it at all. Aaron Sorkin sort of took these actual events and twist them in a way to tell the story that he wanted to tell. And I think it's entirely to the movie's benefit that he did that. There's not a single scene in this movie that I don't think serves some grander purpose, either on a narrative scale, just with this relationship between these characters, but also on a thematic level in terms of how this film is trying to present this depiction of society right now. It's an incredible movie, I think, on every level in terms of dialogue, cinematography. It's actually one of those movies that, in that sense, if you're talking about on a technical level, it's almost boring to talk about because you're just going to say it's amazing in terms of everything.
Yeah. I want to say, every scene, it's almost like every scene has its own arc, I'm watching the movie, second and third time, and it's I didn't get bored, because every scene, there's always some kind of resolution that happens. There's always some conflict and resolution for every single scene, almost.
And there's also a momentum to every scene.
Yeah, it's really thrilling to watch.
I honestly think
a lot of
Go ahead.
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say that I just think that, there's a temptation to cut it some slack too, because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they made an amazing movie about this topic that you thought was so incredibly dry. But, it just is so more compelling than like almost any other experience I've had in a theater this year. Not just, wow, it's compelling for a movie about Facebook.
And let's do a mea culpa here, okay, guys? And let's say that I think when we first heard about it, a lot of people, when we first heard about the Social Network movie, I think we were rightfully very skeptical. When we heard who was involved, then we're like, okay, this could be good. And I think, Devindra, you were one of the original defenders of this concept, because it's kind of similar to Pirates of Silicon Valley, a made-for-TV movie that is kind of one of the few movies that enshrines geekdom in some way, and this movie does that as well. And I feel like it's kind of... A lot of the online blogosphere, which we are a part of, right, took a huge steaming dump on this movie's concept a year ago, or a couple years ago when we first heard about it, and certainly it's something that makes me reconsider how we kind of prejudge movies, and it's something
it's totally easy to be quick to judge. And you look at something like this, and you're like, you have to consider your previous opinions, and I don't know, just keep an eye on that for the future.
Right, But at the same time, snap judgments and inaccurate remarks and kind of inane blathering is why people listen to the Slash Filmcast. So,
exactly.
So it's like, how much should we change? That's the question.
I don't know. But, I think this movie, the fact that it's been made only a couple years after the events depicted. I think we're going to see more of this, because you look at the rate of technological progress, you look at the rate of how things are changing. I feel like there is a need to reflect back on these things and see what they mean for us and for society sooner. Previously, you could wait a good 5 or 10 years or something and kind of reflect back in history. But now it's kind of weird because history is almost happening in real time. I know that sounds silly, but things are changing so quickly that you kind of have to look back and see what happened yesterday and just make sure you fully processed what's going on.
I want to say I love the movie, okay, but I'm kind of like it's almost like I'm really bothered by a lot of the things that Aaron Sorkin has said publicly in promoting the movie. Like, that's actually given me like a more negative impression of the movie than anything in the movie itself, which I think is like unfair. Obviously, we should evaluate movies based on it, but I think it's worth discussing. I first want to say I want to give a shout out to Adam and his review of The Social Network, which I thought was very well written at slashfilm.com, and I like how you put it, Adam. You say. Like any other story that's been inspired by true events, The Social Network is a work of fiction, plain and simple. Though the characters of the film are depictions of real-life individuals, they are not accurately representative of those people, nor are they intended to be. Zuckerberg and all those surrounding him are fictional creations completely to the film's benefit. I agree with you about everything that was said just now, but I don't think Aaron Sorkin does. I think Aaron Sorkin is like, he said, this is nonfiction, we did a lot of research, blah, 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 blah. But
a lot of it is real. Like, I'm not saying that this movie is entirely a work of fiction. Like,
right.
The blog posts that Zuckerberg wrote, those are
real.
Those are his words. Yeah. A lot of stuff came from court documents. Honestly, Zuckerberg kind of came out looking good here, because there were some IM messages that were released a couple months ago that I think was it Silicon Alley Insider
that
dug those up.
There were some IM messages that Zuckerberg sent back in the day that make him look really bad. But I mean, it's like
even worse than anything you see here.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I want to say is also that there are some things in the movie, like while there are some things in the movie that are true, it's clear that it's very likely that Aaron Sorkin invented a lot of things in the movie as well to serve the story's interest. Obviously, they never interacted with Zuckerberg, so how well do they only got one side of the story, and it's interesting to note that the way the movie was written, it was written in parallel with the book Accidental Billionaires. It wasn't like the book Accidental Billionaires was finished and then they wrote the movie based on it. It's like they were writing it at the same time. He got the idea to write the movie based on the book proposal of the Accidental Billionaire. So, and Severin was the primary source for the book The Accidental Billionaires, and he basically like terminated his relationship with Ben Mesrick, the author of that book, when they were getting closer to settlement time for the lawsuit. So that's why that book kind of feels unfinished, and of course Mark Zuckerberg never gets to tell his side of the story. So the book is the kind of recounting of facts is going to be lopsided for that reason. So let me just say, going back to the Aaron Sorkin thing, there's two things that kind of bother me about the way that he's been talking about this movie. And one of the things is he says, there are so many different versions of the facts, so I decided not to present, one version of the facts, and we gave you all of them in this Rashomon style presentation. And it's like, no, that's not like that's just not accurate. Like this is not like Rashomon at all. And yeah,
this is like Rashomon and Citizen Kane, and how many other great movies have they kind of brought up?
I will say I do think this film is pretty great, and actually if not gets to that level, is really very good. Certainly my favorite film of the year so far. But the Rashomon comparison is, I think, completely inaccurate. I mean, it does not primarily it presents a single through line. There's one cohesive storyline, and sure, occasionally people might dispute, like, oh, that didn't happen that way or whatever, but it's not like it's presenting a different version. It doesn't present three different versions to you. It doesn't rewind and present the same scene again or anything like that. And so there's very few moments in the movie where I was in doubt as to what the actual version of events was. So for him to keep spouting the Rashomon line, I think, is in some ways a disservice to Rashomon, and in some ways a disservice to the film. Like it doesn't have to be a Rashomon-like story for the film to work. So that's one thing that bothers me. And the other thing is also just, as I mentioned last week, I think that there's a certain recklessness to what Sorkin has done to the Zuckerberg person in this movie. I mean, Zuckerberg's going to be okay. He's going to survive. He's going to be the world's youngest billionaire, as the movie points out. And I'm not going to feel too bad for whatever this movie does to his image. At the same time, one character in the movie says at one point, "The internet is not written in pencil; it's written in ink." And she's talking about the sort of permanence of something that you write about someone. And it's ironic, given that Aaron Sorkin is writing about Mark Zuckerberg, and this is the image that millions of people will come away. This is what people will think Mark Zuckerberg is like. They're going to think he's a vindictive, petty douchebag, or whatever you think. Whatever you think of him. Like you might not think. You might think he's like a really damaged, sympathetic character. Whatever you think of him is in large part going to be defined to a lot of people by this movie, And I don't think Sorkin has come to terms with that. And, he said, first do no harm. Like, you're talking about someone's life here. But there's nothing in the way he talks about it that makes me think like he really thought through the implications of what he was doing. So that's what I have to say about Aaron Sorkin in this movie. But going back to the movie itself, guys. Okay.
Yeah, that's discussing things more like on a moral standpoint. In terms of like the implications of the movie.
Exactly.
But if you disconnect that aspect from it, it comes down to, I think, more like, is the film real in the ways that actually are important? And I think it is. I think the story it's telling is real in the ways that matter.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean factually accurate, or?
Well, I mean, like, obviously there are events that take place in the film that are factually accurate, but I don't mean that at all. I mean more in terms of what the themes of the film are and how it explores those themes.
Right, exactly. So it's real in the way it makes you feel, like things, in other words. Like the emotions.
No. Because obviously, like, that's like a completely different aspect of the movie, which is sort of like how you respond to, for example, Zuckerberg's relationship with Eduardo in the movie. But I'm talking about more in terms of like how the film chooses, how Sorkin chose to reflect on Facebook in general, like how the effect on society, how youth in society has changed, and sort of the possibilities that the internet provides for people. Yeah, what you can accomplish with it.
Yeah, I read your review, Adam, and I thought that was a really interesting point that I actually didn't even think about. Because, first of all, let me just say, we referred earlier to how the tech press is having a field day writing about how inaccurate this movie is. And I'm referring specifically to Jose Antonio Vargas's review at Huffington Post. I'm thinking of Jeff Jarvis's review, and also Lawrence Lessig's review at The New Republic. And I wrote this on Twitter, and I'm going to say it right now, which is that complaining about how this movie doesn't get Facebook is like complaining that Macbeth by Shakespeare has a poor grasp of 16th century Scottish politics. It's like, that's not what the movie is intended to do. I think that the movie, the Social Network, which, by the way, is named The Social Network ironically, right? Like, Aaron Sorkin named it The Social Network because it's like about these dysfunctional people that can't get along, and they're creating a site that allows people to get along, that allows people to maintain relationships. It's named The Social Network ironically, and the movie, right, has Shakespearean themes, right, about friendship and betrayal And these themes, I think, are timeless. And that's, Facebook, although I think the movie has a pretty good grasp of the basics of how Facebook functions, the movie is not about, in my opinion, the sort of how this site transformed the social networking landscape. I think it's about this relationship, and it uses Facebook as a backdrop to it.
I do think it touches on that, though, within the actual relationships in the film. Like, this is another thing we've discussed before in the past. Like, how do you show how society has changed from something without just randomly having these tangents where you're like showing people that aren't actually connected to the film responding to it? But I feel like this movie does a really, really great job of incorporating slight touches that show you how things are changing.
Right. No,
for example, in a relationship with Eduardo and his girlfriend, they actually touch on that in a really interesting way.
Well, I think the other thing about that is also how the film is so focused on, I think like maybe the period from like 2004 to 2005. So, I mean, by the end of the film is really just at the very, very beginning of sort of all these social changes that all these guys are so hyped up about. Why didn't you talk about this in the movie? But I feel like this is much more focused to like the very just seeing just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what kind of effect this is going to have.
Yeah, right, just like the beginnings of it, you see how it's going to escalate.
Yeah, and this is I think this is like in 2003. This is before MySpace, I believe, right? Like, wasn't MySpace founded in?
No. They discussed MySpace in the movie.
No, I know, but that's an anachronistic reference, though. Like,
actually, I think MySpace started. I think 2000. I think because I think I'm actually. The movie inspired me to start reading the Facebook Effect, the Kirkpatrick book, the David Kirkpatrick book, and I think it says that MySpace started. I think basically opened like right before they got started.
But at that the reference is still anachronistic. We don't need to get into this, but the reference is like doesn't make any sense because at that point in time, MySpace was basically nothing. Like no one knew anything about it. So. It did technically launch in 2003, but at this point, social networking was not like people didn't even understand what that word was. So,
well, I mean, they would know what MySpace was. Like these technically savvy people would know the company that's sort of kicking Friendster's ass. Like they would be aware of it.
All right,
general people.
Fair enough. Yeah. But I want to talk a little bit more about the movie and like the dialogue specifically, and also the look of the movie, right? Because those are kind of the big things. The dialogue is so interesting that one of the criticisms that has been levied against Aaron Sorkin all these years is that a lot of his characters talk in the same way. Do you know what I mean? Like on The West Wing, it's kind of that is like one thing that is interesting about his movies is that a lot of them like they're almost indistinguishable in terms of the people, the characters, and I think he does a pretty good job of striking a balance between his characteristic rapid fire dialogue and also giving each of these people a kind of unique voice. And that's always like the biggest challenge I think with Sorkin is because he has such a really distinct style, and you can see it in that opening scene, which is like a sort of 9-minute long breakup scene. It's a challenge, but I think he really does a good job here. And it's interesting that Fincher was able to take it and put his stamp on it too. Like if you compare, I feel like the sort of look of this movie is very similar to say Fight Club, in terms of the color palette that he uses and the opening scene with where you see kind of one of the opening scenes where you see the elite what are they called? Finals Club at Harvard, where like the way that scene is shot and whatever, it reminded me a lot of the way some of the scenes in Fight Club were shot.
It actually reminded me of like the actual fight scenes in Fight Club. Yeah, you're getting the girls and they're going into these dark rooms, and it's just like weird shit is going on that's sort of defining these people. Yeah, that was kind of interesting. I think thematically, this movie is sort of an interesting sort of sequel to Fight Club too, because the ideas expressed there where, you kind of try not to live or whatever, if you can take a consistent ideology from that film, it's about, not living an expected life and trying to be an independent thinker, I think, trying not to be one of everyone else. This movie is about, people who are creating their own, their own careers, basically. Whereas I feel like you look at maybe the Winklevoss brothers and Divya Narendra, they're people who are trying to kind of mimic the old business way of doing things, of hiring somebody who would create something that they have a vague idea of. Whereas now
they
somebody
can take
like
advantage
Zuckerberg
of their success.
Yeah, exactly. And now somebody like Zuckerberg kind of just has the power to just say, fuck you guys, and make it himself and make his own idea. Right. A multi-billion-dollar business.
I was listening to the I've seen. Go ahead, Anthony. You go first.
So one of the more compelling things I've read about the movie that I think it might be a little bit too simplistic, but it kind of makes sense to me is the idea that Aaron Sorkin approached the film from much less sympathetic view towards Zuckerberg. This sort of the idea that the title is ironic. It's this antisocial guy who created this really powerful tool, and that but then when David Fincher comes in, he's much more sympathetic to this idea of this sort of this revolutionary who has a vision and doesn't necessarily doesn't really care that it's upsetting a lot of people and that he's got to push a lot of people out of the way. And so that's why you get sort of this more nuanced view, is because you get these two guys who actually have fairly different takes on the character.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I was listening to the IFC News podcast discuss this movie, and I think Matt Singer brought up a really good point about all of David Fincher's movies, with the possible exception of maybe Panic Room and Benjamin Button, right? But the other movies are all about like an outcast of some sort, who like can't fit in some way and tries to remake. Tries to either like fails to fit in or tries to remake reality, so
Wait,
that.
Did you say with the exception of Panic Room, Benjamin Button?
I said possible exception of those movies.
Well, definitely not Benjamin Button, but also Panic Room was about a woman started dealing with her like divorce and stuff, so it definitely played into that as well.
Well, there you go. So all of
even Alien 3, like you get that too.
All right, okay, fine, guys, all of them. Okay, all right.
Are we going to start talking about his music videos now?
This just makes my point even stronger. Okay, which is it's about these people who like can't deal with the way reality is, so they remake reality into their own image. They change the world. They try to change the world in some way. And this is particularly true in Seven, right, where there's the serial killer in Seven, and Zodiac, right, also about a serial killer that's really just is kind of is just on a different sort of level or a different kind of plane of thinking, and I don't mean that in a good way, So it is interesting to see how it connects thematically with David Fincher's other movies. I want to give a shout out to the soundtrack and the sound design in this movie. I was watching the kind of featurette about the sound design in this movie, and how the movie cuts between different locations because it intersperses like the deposition and the testimonies with kind of the events of the past, and how in order to achieve like a really good sense of place, they had to have really good sound design, because like you hear, it's very subtle when it cuts to like from Harvard dorm room to courtroom in San Francisco, or sort of a legal law firm office in San Francisco, right? There's subtle differences in the way the background sounds, and without that subtlety, you might have gotten lost in terms of where you were. It's kind of this almost imperceptible difference in the sound. Also, the soundtrack by Trent Reznor was. What did you guys think of that? Like that was kind of different, right? It's consistent with some of Fincher's musical choices. Like he used the Dust Brothers for Fight Club. What did you guys think of the score for The Social Network?
I thought it was phenomenal. Again, like talking about like sort of the momentum of the film, I think the score helps that considerably, just because it gives it this really, really sort of, well, first of all, like it gives it a technological feel because it's kind of this electronica, but it also gives it like this amazing propulsive quality to make stuff that should not be interesting really fun to watch. Like, for example, someone typing away at a computer or doing like coding.
Right.
It's just like that should not be exciting, but because I think partially because of the score, or largely because of the score, but also again like how it fits beautifully with Fincher's style, it gives it this great feeling, this great atmosphere. So yeah, both separate from the film and especially with the film, I think the score is awesome.
Yeah. I think he did a great job.
There are a couple main scenes where the score really shines. Definitely that opening scene where he's creating Face Mash, which I think is one of the best realistic uses of computers on
yes, ever done, ever put the screen in the history of film.
That's setting the bar pretty low.
That's true.
It's very true. Yeah. I mean, this is Linux. I know how to use this. Or no, this is Unix. I know how this works. That's the one from Jurassic Park. But
nice.
it's like yeah, there wasn't much to live up to, but the editing, the pacing, and everything about that scene kind of made it just incredibly interesting to watch.
I was like, yeah, how are they making this creation of this website so interesting? And I was wondering, like, does, like, you know, I'm kind of a geek myself. I wonder if, like, a person who doesn't care anything about computers would find that scene interesting.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it moves by so quickly that I think the score kind of helps keep those people interested when otherwise they wouldn't be. But also, you know, the scene where they meet Sean Parker in a bar. There's this great track running underneath that, and also the you know, the boating scene later on in the film, which could have been just really boring without that really interesting rendition of what was the song's name here?
Which
In the Hall of the Mountain King?
Oh, right, yes.
Done by Trent Reznor. Yeah.
For more information about the score, you should listen to my interview with Trent Reznor, which was released on the Slash Filmcast this week, so check that out. Adam, you were going to say something.
I was going to respond to your question about how interesting the movie or that aspect of the film would be to adults or to people that aren't familiar with computers as much. And I just want to say, like, my mom, who doesn't really see movies that often, on my third viewing of the film, I sort of tried to force her to see it with me, just because I wanted to get sort of an outside opinion. And I also want to point out, like, I honestly think The Social Network is probably one of the most important movies of this decade. I mean, obviously, it's pretty early in, but I would say of the past 10 years as well.
Okay.
And so I was curious, like, how would my mom respond to this movie, who has, like, she just had a Facebook account made for her that she has no, like, you have no idea. My mom's like the most computer illiterate person ever. Like, it's so frustrating watching her try to do something, and I'm like, I could seriously take care of this in 5 seconds, and she barely knows how to use a mouse. So how she responded to this movie, I think, would sort of communicate a lot.
Okay.
She loved the movie. She thought first, like, she actually found it educational, even separate from, like, the events taking place about the founding of Facebook. She found it educational just in terms of how it conveyed this image of youth right now. So, like, sort of it paints a portrait that I feel like a lot of people are disconnected from. A lot of people that are older are disconnected from. So on that level, I think the film is also an incredible success.
You think this presents an accurate portrayal of our youth?
In a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not saying, like, Mark Zuckerberg is the personification of everybody today, but he obviously, him along with a lot of the other characters, they sort of all reflect these different aspects of society.
I think the movie does work on two levels. I think it works as a very personal story of, you know, this friendship that kind of goes awry because of whatever number of reasons, you know, greed, because of a desire for success, you know, because of megalomania, who knows? Like, you can interpret it however you want. So on one level, it's a very small, intimate story, but on another level, I think the movie does kind of, despite what these tech heads will say about how horrible this movie captures the social networking platform and everything, I think this movie does capture the kind of excitement of this time. You know, there's a scene where they're talking in a club, right, which is also excellent sound design because, you know, the music is so loud, but you can still hear everything that's being said, which is like...
It's a lot of, like, awesome bass.
Yeah, and it's like...
Really, really great sound mix.
Yeah, I've never... I can't remember the last time I've seen something like that attempted in a movie and done so well, because it's really skillful. And there's this line that Sean Parker says, "This is our time," you know? And there is something about, you know, the post-dot-com bust, you know, where from the ashes arose these companies that would become billion-dollar companies based on these really simple ideas. And I think the movie
and a lot of them run by essentially kids.
Yeah.
Kids that really haven't grown up yet.
Exactly.
And don't really know how to run a business, and now they're just completely separated from that sort of standard business practices, or that standard sort of, like, group,
right,
that sort of world that you have to actually go through and you have to sort of play into their system. Suddenly, they're just completely separated from that, and they can do what they want. And in a way, it's almost like they're resentful of those people.
Right. I think this movie really captures that kind of excitement and that kind of the disruptive nature of that.
Yeah, I would say excitement is maybe the excitement for them, but not necessarily to our like that's not to our benefit at all. Like,
sure, fair enough.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean,
you kind of see that aspect of the film as well.
You have to wonder, you know, what does it say about a society that will allow someone who's 26 years old to control, you know, $3 billion, right? Like. This is
to be in control of a business that's, like, literally changes the world.
Right. That if it were, you know, as Aaron Sorkin points out during the press conference, if it were a country, it would be the third populous most country in the world. You know, what does it say about a world or a country that allows that to happen? It's interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm. I think what's really interesting, I was talking about this before the show, but the tech journalists have been following the rise of Facebook pretty much since it started happening. So they're very close to this story, and they're well aware how important it is. And I just wonder if it's some sort of reaction to this story kind of getting more mainstream, and now it's sort of, in this film, it's distilled in a way that I think pretty much anybody can understand. And there's maybe some sort of like protective tendencies towards saying, this is our story.
Like they knew about it
exactly how it went down, not how this Hollywood depiction of it goes down.
Yeah, Devindra, kind of like they knew about the Facebook story when it was still cool, and now everyone kind of knows about it, but it's like not the real story. So they're kind of up in arms.
It's the tech hipster effect, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to ask you guys, we love this movie. We've been showering love upon this movie. We think you should go see it if you're listening to this podcast. In fact, if you're listening to the show, why haven't you gone to see it yet? But do you guys think there are any problems with the movie?
I think watching it, I've only seen it twice, but watching it a second time, I think in the first act, the movie it sort of drags a little. I mean, after the coding scene, after the like brilliant virtuoso face mash scene, there are just some scenes where it takes a while for us to get to Sean Parker, who I think kind of gives the film a whole new life. Like once he comes in, Justin Timberlake completely owns that role, and he definitely breathes a whole new life to the film and introduces some new drama within all the relationships. Mm-hmm. But
okay, sorry, continue.
I know you will disagree, Adam.
Yeah, I disagree as well.
Fine.
I disagree as well, but
I think everybody knows you'll disagree. But the first act, like it just sort of drags the second time. I think overall, too, the movie, it's a journey, and to me, that makes it sort of exhausting to watch. This isn't necessarily a complaint, but it's a reason why I can't this isn't a movie I can watch every single day, because you feel the effect of this journey and the big themes and everything going on. This feels like this is a story that matters in a way that I never thought a Facebook story would. So it's not necessarily a complaint, but I don't know. I do feel exhausted by the film.
Quigley?
Okay, yeah. I completely disagree with that, specifically because I feel like a huge aspect of the movie is built on the relationship with Zuckerberg and Eduardo, and that also plays into Sean Parker being introduced after their relationship is already set up. It's sort of like he is the factor that almost kills their relationship, because you see, like, Zuckerberg, if you're going to also bring it up on thematic level, Eduardo kind of represents this kid that doesn't really know what he's doing. He is trying to sort of play into those old business practices that, for example, like he keeps talking about his father. Like, obviously he's trying to impress his father by proving himself in that way. And then Sean Parker comes along, who presents this image that is much more in line with what Mark wants. And that's sort of this huge aspect of what the film is saying, both on a thematic level and a relationship level, that this kid essentially ruins the only real thing in his life, the only real relationship in his life, to go along with this sort of like the fuck the system attitude, and then leaves behind his best friend. And there's something sort of tragic to that, and I feel like it's essential that second part of the film, right after that obviously the face mask sequence, that really builds that up really well. And I felt, watching it 3 times, I had no sort of issue with the way the film handled that.
I want to ask a question. When are we going to get a sort of well-rounded portrayal of an Asian female on the screen in American cinema?
Not in this movie, sir.
Not in this movie. I mean, she's basically the Asian female in this movie, who, by the way, I'm not...
pretty much all
the females in this film, with the possible exception of Rooney Mara's character, are ciphers. And particularly... the Asian girl, what is her name? I feel bad not remembering, but I'm pulling it up now.
Christy.
I remember her character's name, Christy Lee, but I'm wondering what the actress's name that played her was.
Brenda Song, I think.
Yeah, Brenda Song, exactly. Yeah, who's very beautiful, and I think does a fine job doing what's basically a caricature in this movie of
crazy jealous Asian girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's disheartening to see, and I was watching Aaron Sorkin's interview with Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert actually asked him a serious question. He was like, "Where are all the women in this story?" He's like, "What is up with the lack of women in this story?" And Aaron Sorkin, he was like, "I told the story about this story, I told this story, and the genders of the characters were the appropriate for this story. And he's trying to say, oh well, there's a character Rashida Jones, who, by the way, I think has like the most awkward dialogue in the entire movie.
Yeah,
like the most stilted sort of.
She's all audience explanation. She has kind of the most thankless role in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I
agree with that.
I thought she delivered
moral lessons too.
Yeah, exactly. I thought she delivered really awkward dialogue about as well as she could. But she has
like 23,000 hits?
No, 2,200 hits in the first hour.
Oh my God,
22,000 hits, and it's like, wow. And I'm like, my question is, that's a big difference. You weren't paying attention during that part of the deposition, thank you. It's just kind of weird. And she has the last line of the movie, which I didn't think was particularly effective, but yeah, all the women have kind of thankless roles to play in this movie, and that's kind of a shame. I mean, I'm not gonna say, yeah, you should have included more women just because you should have included more women, but it is kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, Zuckerberg does have like he his current girlfriend. I forget her name, but he's been together with her for a while, and that that relationship isn't portrayed at all, and that seems to be a healthy, normal relationship for Zuckerberg.
Exactly.
The movie just kind of ignores that.
Exactly.
She would have been there during those court proceedings, I think.
Yeah, or at least surrounding them. So, I want to give. Go ahead, Adam.
I just want to say, like, I kind of agree with Sorkin's explanation about like why there aren't that many female characters, because a lot of what the film deals with is sort of how Zuckerberg specifically is like motivated by this need to sort of almost get back or like prove himself to the fact that like he doesn't actually, like you see at the end of the movie. There's the girl that he's like
we haven't given away any spoilers yet, Adam.
Oh, we're not spoilers. Yeah. Okay, well then I'll refrain from that, but I'll say that in a bit.
Yeah.
But essentially it comes down to Zuckerberg is trying to prove himself for a variety of reasons, and it's sort of like all sort of hidden below the surface. We don't really sure what his motivations are, but we kind of get a taste of them every now and then when you see him snap, and he's like, we need to expand. But all of it's motivated by the fact that he is sort of disconnected from these things, and the one relationship he actually did have, he killed because he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Although I kind of hated that too, because I mean, yeah, the movie isn't an exact representation of real life, but it does seem kind of kind of unjust to count all of Facebook's creation down to his relationship with one girl.
Yeah, right. Well, that comes down to like a moral discussion versus like narratively what the point of that is.
I agree with you, Adam. Yeah, I think it is a different discussion, but it is.
I also think it's weak. It's just weak storytelling too.
What?
I don't know about that.
I completely disagree with that, because I feel like a lot the film explores a lot of different motivations for what sort of would spawn in this age, in this age group. What would be your motivations, and what would drive you to suddenly create a business like this? And a lot of it comes down to petty rivalries and like girl squabbles.
Yeah, it all like all the epic struggles in the history of man have come down to wanting to get with a girl.
But yeah, all the struggles of men kind of have come down to this. I thought it's less interesting to see them kind of boil down the Facebook story to that.
Sure, that's a fair point, and
but I think that was the point. That is the point of the large.
But that's also it's still legitimate criticism now.
Although I would argue that actually the thing that and going back to sort of the weaknesses was, I felt like that the fact that a lot of this stuff came up at the beginning, and I felt like that was, to me, like Devindra, I think I found that sort of less interesting as an explanation, although I mean, I think so you can make a case for it. But I feel like one of the things I liked about the film for the rest of it was, I think it didn't really focus on that, and sort of I think there are nods to this idea that they're definitely like there's like a whole jumble of reasons, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons why Zuckerberg was acted the way he did and built what he did, and that maybe the girl was the impetus. But you can I feel like he's like such a enigmatic but also kind of angry character for ways that you can't really put your finger on, that it became more interesting as it became less interested in that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting what motives the movie ascribes to Zuckerberg, and I would argue it's cinematically interesting, but certainly the reality is much more complex, and it's like maybe the different movie could have been made that would have been more interesting, but what we have is the movie at hand, and I think it's still really solid, and the way it uses those reasons, I think, is really convincing. So I don't really have a problem with that, because I mean, it was Helen of Troy's face that launched 1,000 ships, and it was this girl apparently who caused this entire thing to happen in this movie, at least. You feel like Aaron Sorkin is reaching for that kind of epic sort of classic sort of work. Shakespeare and the Iliad and the Odyssey. Aeschylus is someone that he's invoked in the past, like Greek tragedy, and I think he makes it work. So.
Yeah, I also just feel like it's the most sensible explanation. I don't feel like that's really fair to knock the film for that when it really is sort of trying to ask this question of like, for the film to do anything else, I honestly think it would be dishonest. I was talking about like I feel like the movie's real in the ways that matter. That's one of the reasons I feel like it is real, because those are his motivations. And I feel like if you have a kid at this age suddenly trying to have this business and trying to have this enterprise built, those probably would be like two large motivators for him. And I'm sure even in the reality, even if it wasn't necessarily the motivation that drove him, it still certainly it was still certainly a concern. It was still certainly an issue.
Couple other things I want to talk about in terms of what I like about this movie. I loved the Winklevoss twins as played by Armie Hammer. I thought it was digital trickery on par with what they did in Benjamin Button. It's shocking that this one guy played these two characters in the movie. And I interviewed Armie Hammer, which is an interview that's on /film.com, and he was saying how his greatest achievement as an actor was after the movie screening. A woman came up to him and was like, "I thought you did an excellent job in that movie." And Armie Hammer was like, "Oh, thank you so much." And he's like, "But not your brother. He's way overacting in the film." and he thought like that was a great achievement.
Yeah. The movie, I think Sorkin does a good job of giving both of those brothers different voices.
They're kind of they have different they're kind of different characters in the movie as well. But it was a combination of like using a stand-in and using digitally grafting Armie Hammer's head onto a double. That allowed them to achieve this kind of trickery that was really.
I think if anything Fincher has accomplished on film, in the past decade, I mean more so than the Benjamin Button effects, which are totally there to be noticed and be obvious. The fact that so many people can walk out of this movie and not notice that, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's best when Fincher's work is like his special effects are best when you're not noticing them. I think.
Yeah, you look at Panic Room and Benjamin Button is like his most exorbitant. Let's move the camera everywhere. Type of deal.
Although he did have that obligatory camera going through a pillar shot in the nightclub in the Social Network.
I also love there's one scene where Zuckerberg throws a beer bottle right at the camera and explodes right in front of the camera. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. I also like how the movie's really quotable, or at least in my mind, it's really quotable. I love these one-liners that these characters give throughout the movie. And the day after I saw the movie, I put the trailer on repeat, reliving some of those moments from the movie. Particularly the courtroom scenes. I mean, I don't think that that's how adult humans conduct themselves when you're giving a deposition or whatnot. But it is really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, that also I think is a huge achievement. For Sorkin, at least, just because, how do you make dispositions interesting?
Depositions, but yes.
Sorry.
I agree, and he did a really good job. And I think his mastery of the timeline is really impressive too. It's the movie bounces between 3 different times and locations, and it's there's the kind of through line from the beginning, and then there's the 2 depositions that are taking place, and it's really interesting how the movie is able to maintain allow you to follow the story while at the same time giving you all this different information. Any other thoughts on the movie before I move into spoilers, guys?
I'm okay.
All right. I think we're good. So let's just say I feel like I had one other thing to say, but I guess I'm going to save it for spoilers. So from this point on, spoilers for The Social Network. If you don't want to hear the ending of The Social Network, then tune out now. I just want to say I loved. This is, first of all, one of the few films in the history of American of cinema ever where the climax of the movie is a scene of stock dilution, I want to say. And I thought, even though that's the case, it's still really effective. And I absolutely love the way that scene is shot when Andrew Garfield just completely flips on Mark Zuckerberg,
the way the camera follows him.
Yeah, the camera follows him from a low angle, right? So you get this kind of sense of menace, and it follows him over, and you feel his anger as he completely slams down that MacBook Pro on top of Mark Zuckerberg's desk.
It was a Sony Bio, Dave.
Sorry, whatever. But
it's Zuckerberg's distinctive Sony Bio, because this is a Sony movie. Let's not forget.
Oh, right, you're right. Good point. Oh, that's
I think also that it's clear that Fincher was really fetishistic about all the harp. I think I was giggling because you keep seeing and then it's like an iBook that looks exactly like an iBook from 2004.
Yeah, you always see the Apple logo right above, right at the top. Yeah, but you never see the full Apple logo.
Exactly. Yeah. I know exactly what shot you're talking about. And then the movie, Aaron Sorkin has said repeatedly that the character spends the first hour and 55 minutes being an anti-hero, Mark Zuckerberg being an anti-hero, and the last 5 minutes being a tragic hero, meaning that the last few minutes of the movie he's realized the error of his ways, and he tries to redeem himself by sending a friend request to the girl that he had sort of wronged so long ago. What do you guys make of that interpretation? Do you guys find the ending satisfying?
Wait, so did you say, did Sorkin say that?
Yes.
Wow.
Which part are you asking if Sorkin said?
That was his explanation for what the ending represents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I read that a lot differently.
Yeah. Tell us how you read it, Adam.
I read it. Well, I read it as tragic, but for a different reason. I read it as tragic because, at the beginning of the movie, you actually see him in a relationship, and then by the end of the film, and this also, since we're in spoiler territory, the thing I was referring to earlier, there's this moment where you see him trying to basically. He doesn't know how to talk to this girl or ask her out, so he basically just has an intern send over packages with stuff he doesn't actually need, and he still doesn't actually say anything to her. It's just basically for the sake of being able to see her. Through this experience, he has learned nothing. His entire motivation was built on trying to prove himself, and it didn't actually really serve that purpose. He doesn't care about money, which he now has, but he doesn't actually know how to talk to girls, and it ends with him staring blankly at a computer screen, sending a friend request, and just constantly refreshing the page as he hopes that she accepts it.
Well, one of my favorite parts of the movie is actually Jesse Eisenberg's performance, and I think that I might have doubted his acting capabilities in the past, but no more after this movie, because there is so much, a lot of this movie is people sitting around tables talking to each other, right? And there is so much that's conveyed in the looks on Jesse Eisenberg's faces, the different faces that he makes in the movie, especially between him and Eduardo Safran. There's just so much there. There's so much detail in that performance. There's
also a lot of sexual tension, but yes,
there's longing, and there's this apologeticness, and there's vindictiveness. There's all this stuff going on, and it's very few words are being said. It's all in the look, and that final look that Eisenberg is giving the screen. It's kind of this longing. It's kind of this please just accept this friend request, accept my sort of olive branch. He desperately wants some kind of peace, and it is what makes him a tragic figure, I think. Is that he's unable to overcome himself. I saw this movie with the film critic / writer Mary H.K. Choi, and she was saying how it's almost it's almost excusable the way he acts, because someone that brilliant, it's almost like that's the only way they can act.
They're sort of building him up, sort of like House on TV, or any sort of asshole character.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the other thing I liked about his performance, and you guys mentioned Scott Pilgrim earlier, and I thought it was actually comparable to Michael Cera's performance in some way, that it has a lot of the same mannerisms that you're used to seeing from them, but then it's just undercuts all of that, and it's sort of acting kind of similar to this kind of quirky, guy that they've played in other movies, but then it just sort of shows why that can actually be really obnoxious and kind of terrifying. Well, not terrifying in Scott Pilgrim, but in The Social Network.
Right. Did you guys like Eisenberg's performance? I assume you were fans?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I thought all the actors in this film were pretty incredible.
Yeah.
With the exception of, as you guys noted, Rashida Jones, who didn't really have an opportunity to give a good role. But everyone else, I feel nailed their parts. And even Rooney Mara, who had a pretty small role, I still feel made an impression.
I totally can't wait to see her as Elizabeth Salander now, because she just in her few minutes, she left a definite impression on me in this film. And I also think Justin Timberlake, we haven't really talked about his casting, but the fact that they got one of the most successful musical acts ever to play Sean Parker, I think
the guy that destroyed the music industry.
Yeah. So whenever he says stuff like that, have you when he's talking about how much he's destroyed the record labels, or what is it? Have you bought which record store was it lately?
Yeah, I just love everything. He's like
Power Records,
he's like, what did he say? I won against the music industry, and he's like, well, you lost in court, and he's like, you want to buy Tower Records? And I just, he is so much, he's so cocksure, he's so smug and full of himself and conniving. He plays such a great character in this movie, you know. I kind of love it. But at the same time, not someone who's averse to pulling out his inhaler when he needs it. You know, there's this whole conflict in that it sets up about, like, maybe super confident on the outside, but maybe inside he has no idea what the hell he's doing emotionally, which apparently the real Sean Parker is not really like. But
well, I think also the part of the point was like showing that he was a lot like Mark Zuckerberg. Like he was a geek that is sort of showing like how he transformed himself because of what possibilities are now available. Yeah, and you see like sort of this, like it's almost like a reveal. It's like this guy was actually the same sort of nerdy guy that Mark Zuckerberg will probably become now.
Yeah,
that point makes sense. Mark Zuckerberg will become what you see Sean Parker in the movie. Maybe.
I feel like that ending kind of warned Mark Zuckerberg off from that thing.
Right. But like it's sort of like foreshadowing what could happen.
Right. That's true. And I just love all the lines that, you know, Sean Parker says, like, look at my face and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. It's got you believe that he knows what he's talking about. So, any other thoughts on this movie before we close off, guys? Because I think we have fully exhausted the things that can be praised and
so far, as far as we can think about now, until we get the 3-hour director's cut or whatever.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you guys want to discuss more themes of the film, but one thing we haven't really talked about that boat sequence with the tilt photography.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the tilt shift. Yeah.
The tilt. That was, first of all, like a very incredibly filmed sequence. But also just sort of in terms of like the importance, like the Winklevoss twins coming up second, like that sort of that section of the film sort of showing the importance of even though they were like right behind this other team, because they came up second, it's like they're irrelevant.
Yeah. And I actually think that scene may have happened that way in real life. Like they did lose the race, and then they heard about Facebook being in the UK, like at the after party. So
really, I heard that was
some of the most memorable things from this film. I think are kind of funny because they may be real.
I heard that scene was inaccurate, actually, but specifically,
I did read Accidental Billionaires, but yeah, it's up to how accurate that book is. So.
Right.
But they definitely like learned all this stuff in a very quick succession. So yeah.
But that whole element of the film is really interesting to me because like you also have the whole thing like the metaphor about the fish, capturing the fish, like who. Mm-hmm. Who do you actually recognize in that situation? It's like, yep, if you're not number one, then no one gives a shit. Yeah. And it's like, that's kind of a sad, but it's the way things are.
Don't fish eat other fish?
I think that what was funny was David Fincher is like notoriously like he demands a lot out of his actors, and you know going to the press conference for this film that was very clear. And apparently he made the actor Armie Hammer and I think his double Josh Pence train so that they could actually row in that regatta. Like they actually trained for 5 weeks so they could accurately row.
They look like they could be Olympic rowers.
Yeah, and the opening scene of the film between Eisenberg and Rooney Mara was apparently shot 90. They did 99 takes of that shot.
Yeesh. Was that all one take? No, there was back and forth.
But it was just 3 setups. Like it was like the back one angle back. There's like the wide angle and then the one face and the other face. So it's like it was a very simple setup, but they shot it 99 times.
Yeah. What's your guys' take on the tilt shift in the boat scene? Because the first time I saw it, I thought it was just kind of Fincher showing off. But the second time I saw it, I wonder if it's more about like their, I don't know, maybe their focus or their drive in that race and how they shut everything else out.
I thought it was.
I think that was an interesting use of tilt shift if that was the case.
Well, according to an interview that Peter did with David Fincher, he says. Fincher says, we could only shoot 3 races at the Henley Royal Regatta. We had to shoot 4 days of boat inserts at Eton. The only way to make the date for release was to make the backgrounds as soft as humanly possible. I decided it might be more subjective, quote-unquote, if the world around the races fell away in focus, leaving the rowers to move into and out of planes of focus to accentuate their piston-like effort. So it was basically like they had no time. They had to just shoot this as quickly as possible. Let's make the backgrounds really blurry.
Okay.
Well, I also like that it gave it sort of like the storybook quality that that this is kind of like the old world that they're living in, and then it's sort of the reality of what is how they're basically being completely beaten and comes up and so that this feels like kind of this remove and then it kind of then back to the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and speaking of the themes of the movie, Adam, I was reading this New York Times article about the movie. It's called A Zillion Friends and a Few Enemies, and I love how, I think it's Fincher that's characterizing this. He says, when you are directing a deposition, half the table has to believe that this guy took your idea and ran with it and screwed you out. But on the other side of the table, you have someone who says, without what I did, there would be no spoils to divide. And I think that really, when I read that, it really, struck out to me. It's like, yeah, like on the one, what did you guys make of this whole conflict of like Mark Zuckerberg, quote unquote, stealing the Winklevoss's idea? I mean, this is the one part of the movie that I think is kind of interesting, is you can kind of make your own judgment about whether he actually did steal anything. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people come away thinking, no, he didn't steal it. They're like, Match.com for Harvard students. Well, look at you guys. A lot of us probably react like Zuckerberg did. I mean, what did you guys think?
This is actually a story I've been following for many, many years, because when we were all in college when Facebook came out, or most of us. Sorry, Adam, but when we saw this thing come out, it's like it was definitely a big shift. But then the story about Connect U, which is what Harvard Connection was eventually, the name was changed to. I thought that was really interesting, just because there was so much evidence pointing to the fact that Zuckerberg did steal the idea. And I think reading both Facebook Effect and Accidental Billionaires, there's definitely the sense that he knew what he was doing when he was when he accepted the job, but then he proceeded to work on Facebook. I think he knew that he was just doing this thing, and I don't think ethically he understood why that was wrong, but I think he did do it willingly to just not develop their site and work on his site in the meanwhile.
I mean,
but at the same time, the movie does a good job of portraying both sides as somewhat sympathetic, and I think the Winklevoss twins, like, they were paid $65 million because of this, them and Divya Narendra, and they're gonna be fine in life. Like, they have nothing to worry about. So really, it's more of something about unfairness.
Although interestingly, that case is still, they appealed that case because apparently a new round of investors came in, and that $65 million worth of shares was diluted to like $12 million.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So now they're like appealing that, because they still don't have enough money.
So it's like he ended up paying them because I think he legitimately did. He was inspired by their idea for this Harvard-only social network. Because, without that meeting, who knows if he ever would have created Facebook.
I don't know if I agree with you, but I think that's part of the strength of the film, is that you can come away with a different conclusion. And I think he's paying them because it's the most convenient thing to do, but that's me.
Well, I think that that thread also carries over to the even the treatment of the Saverin character, who, I mean, definitely is much more sympathetic, and he's the one who gave the most interviews for the book that became the movie. But even so, I think you can still watch it and be kind of like, well, dude, like you went to New York for 3 months and then you went back to school. Like, of course you were going to get cut out. I mean, what did you think would happen? And like that, even though he contributes the money and is like a friend to Zuckerberg, I mean, you get, I mean, at the same time, Zuckerberg drives everything. And so you can say, I mean, even though you feel bad for Saverin, like, you don't walk away from it thinking that, like, man, like, he was like really integral to making Facebook what it was. He put up the initial money, he was a good friend to Mark, but ultimately it's, it is, as the line says, it is a Mark Zuckerberg production.
Again, I think you can interpret that differently, though. But yeah, the Kirkpatrick book about the founding of Facebook, called The Facebook Effect, certainly sort of comports with that reading. And Saverin apparently is the only true accidental billionaire, in the sense that he wasn't really that invested in terms of his time commitment. He put up some money, but now he's a billionaire. And it's not like he, aside from the money, was he really that instrumental to Facebook? It's tough to say. So, all right, guys, I think we can wrap up unless there's any closing thoughts. We've been talking about this movie for like an hour, which I think is, I mean, I could spend another like half hour praising the movie. So I'm not going to, but I could. But I'm just saying, I really like the movie. Go ahead.
So the one thing I would say, just since I was brought on as the tech reporter or whatever, is that I did come away. I think the other thing I really liked about it, and that I think is partially why I think some of the tech world criticism of it is kind of misguided. That you just you just get this incredible energy of like an excitement about like the creation of this thing. that, I walked out of it being like, oh, like, hell yeah, I totally want to work for a startup like that. Would, like, there, like maybe obviously like there's, maybe it's sort of like the Gordon Gekko thing where like maybe that's not exactly what they intended.
Yeah.
But it's filmed so like well, and there's so much energy and excitement that you kind of walk out and you're like, wow, that looked so cool. And I suspect I probably wasn't the only one who walked out of it feeling that way.
I think that's true, and I think that's a good point. I would say I have no problem with people sort of writing about the accuracies and inaccuracies of the movie, and kind of. I think that's fascinating analysis, But I think a lot of the tech press are kind of writing about this movie, couching it as like a movie review. Which I think a lot of those reviews are just utterly preposterous. That's my opinion on it. Like, I think if you evaluate this as a movie, again, you can dislike it, but dislike it on its own terms. Don't dislike it on the movie, this fictional movie about how revolutionary Facebook was, that wasn't actually made, but is made in your own mind. Of course, one could argue that that's what we do on the Filmcast all the time. We compare movies to movies we wish had been made in our own mind. But whatever, I don't mind having a double standard. That's fine. Thank you for that perspective, Anthony. I do appreciate it, and I think we can wrap things up for this week's episode of the Filmcast. Music for our podcast usually comes courtesy of musicalley.com. The bands we use are usually Point22 at point22.com, at Bradsucks at bradsucks.net. Although I will be using Trent Reznor's score for The Social Network at the beginning and end of this week's episode, and I'd invite you to check out my interview with Mr. Reznor. You can find all of our back episodes at /filmcast.com and email us. Let us know what you thought of The Social Network at /filmcast@gmail.com. You can also call and leave a voicemail at 781-583-1993. So, guys, let me ask you where we can find more of your work on the internet this week. Anthony.
VentureBeat.com for my tech reporting, and then I also have a personal site, anthony-ha.com.
Devindra Hardawar.
I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/Devindra. You can find everything I do at devindra.org, including my tech podcast. And yeah, I also write for VentureBeat.com, where I compete with weekly traffic against Anthony.
Excellent.
He wins most weeks.
Adam Quigley.
You can check out my writing at slashfilm.com, and I recommend checking out my full review of The Social Network. Click the reviews, and it's the first one there. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/alwayswatching.
You can find me at twitter.com/Dave Chensky, at davechen.net, and you can also find me at tobolowskifiles.com, which is the recipient of a new book deal from Simon & Schuster. So a big congratulations to Stephen for that, because that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The Tobolowski Files book is a nonfiction book that's scheduled to come out in 2011, and I'm very excited. But you guys, let's just put it this way. We don't know how long we're going to be able to keep hosting the Tobolowski Files. So if you guys have any passing interest, I'd recommend you download all the episodes now and check it out. Get in on the ground floor before
while
this thing.
Free.
While it's free. Before this thing takes off. Exactly. Before you have to go to audiblepodcast.com/filmcast to download it. You know what I'm saying? So check it out at tobolowskifiles.com, and congratulations to Stephen for that. And that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of the Filmcast. Tune in next Sunday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Pacific at /film.com/live. We'll be reviewing Matt Reeves' film Let Me In, which was actually released this past week, but basically none of you guys saw it. So go out and see the movie. I think it's worth seeing, and I'd like to talk about it next week with you guys. And so check it out. Let Me In next week at /film.com/live. Thank you guys for listening to the official podcast of /film.com. Good night.